There are endless ways of creating the graphics for our game. When I was planning this course, I tried to think about the most suitable method for us, considering I should assume no prior knowledge in any specific computer programs. I will show you some quick examples of different approaches, and then I will go through the approach I selected for this course in more detail. If you're creating a retro style game with pixel art graphics, which I love by the way, you might want to consider a sprite editor. Here's an example of a free online sprite editor called Piskel. Or maybe you're familiar with After Effects and can create some sprite animations there. For 3D looking graphics, you might want to have a go with Blender since it's open source and completely free. It also has quite a steep learning curve, unfortunately. Or you could use a vector graphics program like Illustrator or Inkscape to create your game graphics. Because I didn't want to involve too many different programs for this course, I chose an approach in which you can simply draw your graphics on a piece of paper. I used household paper simply to get a nice texture for the images. Here are some of the pieces I drew. The next step is to simply photograph or scan them in order to get them into a computer. This creates a pretty simple workflow for us, but even now we need some program to remove the background color from the images. I'm used to Photoshop, so I will do my work there, but I have also recorded a video in which I do the same thing in GIMP, which is a free image manipulation program. It's up to you if you want to remove the backgrounds yourself or not. It's good practice, but it also takes some time. I will provide you with my source images both in their original state and in their finished state, in which the backgrounds have already been removed. So you can choose which files you want to continue working with. So let's say I just plugged my camera into my computer. Here are the images that I took. I photographed some of the smaller elements together. The larger items have their own separate pictures. The first thing to do is to go ahead and copy the files into our original images folder. So I will select all these files, maybe cut them, and here's this original images folder. Let me just paste them there, and now I will open them up into Photoshop. So let me go into Photoshop, File, Open, and I will select all of them together by holding down Shift. It selects everything, and I can open them. They will all open up separately here into Photoshop. And now I basically want to get rid of the background colors. So there's several different techniques for that, but we might try to use the Magic Wand tool, for example, here. So with the Magic Wand tool selected, I can click here and it will select continuous areas of that color. Okay, and let me also hold down Shift to select these parts in the middle. And now the last thing I typically do in Photoshop is I will go and do this refine edge thing here. And before I do that, it might be a good idea to inverse the selection, because now I have selected the background, but typically I want to have the foreground item selected when I go to this refine edge function here. So I will inverse my selection, and then I will go select refine edge. And this is a nice little tool that helps us kind of figure out how the selection will look. I might turn on Smart Radius, adjust that a little bit. You can use the smoothing if you want. Maybe I will shift the edge to kind of remove the edges, to make the edges a bit thinner. And then finally, when I'm done here, I can, let's play with the contrast just a little bit. Okay, I think that's fine. And when I'm done here, I can select how I want to handle this selection that I'm creating here with this refine edge tool. And I want to output the selection. I think I want to use it as a layer mask, because this will allow me to fix it later if there's something I'm not happy with. So this is a non-destructive way of getting rid of the background. So output selection to layer mask, I will hit OK. And after a few seconds, it will create the mask. And now we can see this checkerboard in the background that indicates that this is now transparent. The next step could be desaturating the image. So I will go to Image, Adjustments, and Desaturate. This will get rid of the obvious tint that these images had. One other thing I might do is I might use the adjustments curves in order to make the foreground elements slightly lighter. So just make this kind of contrast curve where the blacks are still quite visible, and then this is boosting basically the middle ground, which was grayish, and when I take it up into this direction, then it will become slightly more light. So we go from this to this. Okay, I think we are done with this element here. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this is like a hill, and I think this one should be pretty easy. I'm just going to click here, then I will go to inverse my selection and select refine edge, and let me use the smart radius again here. Okay, I will fast forward this part because it's pretty much the same that I just showed you, and I don't want to bore you to death, so let's just fast forward until we get to something new. Maybe I want to rotate this so that it's straight, so let me just use my move tool and rotate this layer to make it straight, and then I will do some of the same steps. So let's say, let me choose desaturate, and then I will also do something with the curves, and this is a background element, so I don't want it to be too bright because I don't want the player to be confused if he can jump on top of it or something. I want the background to be kind of slightly darker than the foreground. So what I can do is I can take this light end here and I can pull it down to make this element a little bit dark. Something like that, I think. And let's go to the next one. Here's our house. This might require a couple of clicks. And maybe I will just also, because there's this dust on the background, maybe I will just use the selection tool here. If I hold down Shift, it will get this small plus symbol next to it, and when it has that plus symbol, then I can just add things to the selection. So I will basically just manually add these dusty areas that otherwise it didn't get selected properly. Okay, I think that's fine. Alright, with this image, let me just magic wand it again first, and we can see that it kind of leaks into these some of the areas here. That's okay, we can stop that with the lasso tool. I will just use a negative lasso by holding down Alt, and I will manually tell it to not select these parts here, because they should remain as they were, like that. Alright, and now let's go to invert the selection, so inverse, and then refine edge. And this tree looks a bit dark. It didn't get as much light when I photographed it as these other elements, so maybe I'll use the dodge tool, and let's see if I can kind of lighten it up slightly. Okay, and now let me arrange these elements so that there's a bit more space between them. So I will select this small hill here. I'm going to rotate it straight. Oh, let me apply the layer mask before I do that. So I will right click on the layer mask and say apply layer mask, so that I don't need to worry about the mask. I will make my canvas also a bit bigger, so image canvas size. Let's make it like 200%. So now there's a lot more room here, and I won't need that much, but I will crop the rest out later. So now I can select maybe this element here first. Let me just make a quick selection like this. Then I will move it, rotate it so that it's straight, like that. Hit enter. Then I will take my player character here and move him as well. Rotate him like that. I will take his hand maybe at this point and separate it slightly, because it's going to be a separate object in the game, so that we can animate it. I'm going to make that look a bit more round, like that. And the leg should be separate ever so slightly. And let's make this a bit more round looking as well. Alright, so now we can select these, maybe move them a little bit closer so that we don't waste too much space. Let me select this cloud element here, straighten it out. Put it here. I want to leave some space between, just so that I can add a nice drop shadow in the end here. Okay, that looks better. They're kind of straight now. And let's give them the drop shadow. Can be something like 45-degree angle maybe. Let's make the size a bit bigger and the distance. Alright. Don't want to make it too visible, maybe something like that. Alright, then I will hit OK. And now let's crop the unnecessary empty space from this. Something like that. And now I will save this. And I will save it in the edited images as a PNG file. And I will call it sprite sheet. I actually made earlier a sprite sheet already, but I forgot to straighten these elements out, so I will just replace my earlier attempt now that everything has been straightened. And then there's this one final photograph, which will be basically the end goal, where the player gets home to his house. So let's do the same thing here. I will simply desaturate. Something like that should be okay. And I won't move these elements around except for the lamp. I want the lamp to be on top of the table, so I will just quickly select the lamp here, basically like cutting it out with scissors. As you can see, I'm not too worried about leaving some room on the edges. Just cut it out quickly. And then I will move it on top of the drawer here. Something like that should be fine. And I don't want the bottom part of this at all, so let me just crop it with the crop tool. Like that. Okay, there's one more image, this one, the background. So for this one, I think I simply want to, first of all, let me use the crop tool to get rid of the parts that I don't need. Yeah, I think I will just crop this slightly and not do much more with it right now. Alright, so now let's save these files for construct. And you know, these are very large files at the moment because they are still straight from the camera. So if I go to image size, you can see that the resolutions are very big here. And we don't need this big resolutions, so it's kind of waste of space to use resolutions this accurate. So what I will do is that instead I will create a new Photoshop file, and I will use this same size that I used for my construct project window size or game window size. So new document, I will call this final assets. And then I can start bringing my files here. So let's maybe start with this one, and I will duplicate this one into the final assets here, and now I will scale this down so that it makes more sense again. So something like that. And now I will save this file, save as edited images. I will call this home inside maybe, and make it a PNG file, save. Okay, now that's done. Now let's go here, we'll duplicate this layer, put it into the final assets document. There's one thing that I think I forgot, which might look nice. Maybe I'll add a slight drop shadow to this. So just as a layer style, I will double click here, and I will go to drop shadow. Just make a slight drop shadow so that it looks like they are it kind of separates them from each other, then it gives them a little bit depth. I think something like that. Okay, now I will save file, save as PNG. Let's call this one house outside. And let's go to our next one, which is this one. Put it on the final assets. Okay. Okay, let's scale this down. You can see these are way bigger than what we need, so it's a good idea to scale them down. Something like that. Let's give this one the drop shadow, paste layer style. And I'm going to call this hill. There's a little bit of empty space there, so I can do this. I can temporarily crop it like that and then save it like that. I just have to remember to undo that ladder, and then I will undo the cropping. And then I think we are down to this one here. Let's desaturate it. Desaturate, and I want to make it quite dark, since this will be the furthest away background. So let's go to curves, and we want to make it quite dark, I would say. There's also a slight blemish there that I don't like. I want to get rid of that one, so let me just select it with the lasso tool here, and that one as well. And then let's see, fill, content aware, and it gets rid of them. So now with this one I want to be more careful with the size, because this is going to be tiled background. In Construct there's an object type called tiled background, and this one basically, if I go to the help file here, so this one basically, if you check the manual, it wants to have a power of 2 sizes. So 16 times 16, 32 times 32, 64 times 64, you get the picture, and that will give the best results. So let's make sure that our image size in Photoshop here is exactly that. So what I will do is I will go to my canvas size, image, canvas size, make it pixels, and I'm going to make the canvas, let's make this 512 times 512, Whoops, I have to undo that. Okay, so I need to unlock the background layer first by double clicking on it. That way the resizing of the canvas won't destroy the edges of the picture. 512 times 512. Okay, proceed. Yeah, now that it wasn't the background, now it's stayed. We still have the image here to work with, and now I will just scale this down to fit the new canvas size, and this is now going to be a decent file for Construct. So let me save this file, save as edited images, and this is going to be PNG file background. Alright, so now we have created all our files in Photoshop, and the next thing to do is start working with Construct.